Okay, we left off last week was basically showing how that as much as what happened in Mitzrayim, Kilu, that was a time from the past. No one really connects with that too much. It happened a long time ago in the past. And whatever happened since then, there's been Galus Bavel, there's been a Gula from Bavel, there's been Galus Yavin, and then also Gula from Yavin. Rome is still going on, basically. But, that's water under the bridge. What happened back 3,320 some odd years ago is basically in the past. It doesn't have much to do with today. That's the way most people think about it. We do the Haggadah on Leil Seder to remind us as the Kosh Baruch Hu once took us out, then every generation they rise to go fight against it, to try and destroy us. The Kosh Baruch Hu always saves us. But when it says that a person to look at themselves as if they too left Mitzrayim, it's more of a figurative thing, because had we not left back then today we wouldn't be here as a nation. But it turns out it's not exactly like that. It turns out that, as we saw, according to the Rizal first, in Shir HaGilgulim, where he basically talks about the fact that the final generation before Mashiach comes is going to be it's Chazara. We're going to have a repeat of what happened at the beginning of history, will happen at the end of history, where Moshe Rabbeinu will come back inside the body of Mashiach. He's Mashiach of the year, Mashiach ben David. The body can come from Yehuda, and the Neshama can come from where it has to come. And that the generation of Dor Midbar will come back and be the Neshamas of Klal Yisrael at the end of history, and also the Erev Rav will come back as well. That's what the Rizal says, and it'll be just like leaving Mitzrayim, because as we pointed out before in the past, and it's obvious that Geula from Mitzrayim is a work in progress. We didn't complete the picture. We didn't do what had to be done. It was, in a sense, it was unmitigated failure in the end. We lost 4/5 in Makas Choshech. The 1/5 that did leave barely left. They died in the desert. The ones that went into Eretz Canaan eventually, it was 39 years later. It was it was not exactly what it should have been in the first place. And that's only because of the fact that Kosh Baruch Hu made a promise to Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov that somebody would go out. Someone would go to Eretz Canaan, the fourth generation, and if Kosh Baruch Hu had done what should have been done, he would have left us alone to basically assimilate completely. But because of the promise, because of Bris Avos, that Kosh Baruch Hu sealed with Abraham, that he interfered in history when he did. And he brought a case to Galus Mitzrayim 190 years early. So as the Beit Ishchai points out, that the one of the names of the end of history is Ketz Yamim. Ketz Yamim means the end of those days, not the end of days, but the end of those days. Which days are we talking about? We're talking about the days that were not completed in Mitzrayim. Even though Rashi is a cheshbon, because ain't a pasuk is pshuto, that you have to still pasuk has to work, has still fit. So Kosh Baruch Hu said we'd be strangers in the land, not ours, for 400 years. So Rashi said we're working it out. It's not exactly Mitzrayim. It's not so. But the Metzias it was supposed to be Mitzrayim.
Where's the hay? You're dealing with the hay here?
That's the hay.
Where does the pasuk appear?
It doesn't really appear. The case shows up lots of places, but the actual phrase Ketz Yamim, I don't recall if it's a pasuk per se, but that is the name that's used in the Gemara, for example, and the Medrash for the end of days. That's the term. But that's what it's referred to, Ketz Yamim, not Ketz Yamim. So Ketz Yamim means the end of those days, which days we're talking about. The ones that were left incomplete in Mitzrayim, the Ben Ishchai points out, that's why the Gematria of case is 190, to point out that the 190 years that was left over after we left Mitzrayim, because we could not be sovel them, we couldn't survive them, we would have assimilated completely, so that was spread out like a mortgage. It was refinanced. It was spread out over the course of 3,000 some odd years until Mashiach finally comes. So actually the final redemption is really the end of the first redemption, because there was only supposed to be one Galus anyhow, and one redemption. That's why there were four that were predicted in the second pasuk of Bnei Bereshis, and later on to Avram Avinu in the Bris of Besarim. But Mitzrayim is not mentioned in those, because really Mitzrayim was the umbrella Galus, and if that had gone properly, the other four would not have been necessary. Not Bavel, not Madai, not Yavin, not Edom, because it would have all been done back then. The Rizal points out that really, rather than go down to Mem Tashai Tuma, the Jewish people were supposed to elevate the Mitzrayim to Nun Shai Kedusha, and that would have effectively brought about a transformation of history that's tantamount to Techis Amazing, the resurrection of the dead. So we pointed out it's interesting because we were there for 210 years. We spent 40 years wandering the Midbar. According to the Zohar, there's 40 years of Kibbutz Galios, followed, according to Yehuda, of 210 years of Techis Amazing. So like bookends of history, 210 and 40, and 40 and 210. That's not coincidental. Rabbi Yitzchak holds 214.
I didn't follow.
That the beginning of history, the beginning of Jewish history,
Right.
that you have, even though it was supposed to have been 400, according to Rashi, 210 was enough. And that's followed by 40 years in the Midbar, even though it was supposed to really be just a year, 2 years in the Midbar, because we're supposed to go right to Eretz Yisrael.
So 210 in Mitzrayim.
210 Mitzrayim and 40 in the Midbar.
Right? Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
And then we have the end of history,
Right.
according to Zohar, 40 years of Kibbutz Galios,
Right.
of ingathering the exiles,
Okay.
followed by 210 years of Techis Amesim, according to Rabbi Yehuda. According to Rabbi Yitzchak, it's 214, but they're both based upon Psuki, but 210, makes a lot of sense. That certainly, like, if you look at that on a timeline, it's 210, 40, and 4210, with the period in between basically making up the 190 years that was not completed in Mitzrayim, because we had to pay for it.
Okay.
You can't, whatever had to be accomplished.
Does,
Exactly. Whatever had to be accomplished in those 190 years to transform Klal Yisrael into the that they're supposed to become, to go to Eretz Canaan and become, Klal Yisrael and bring Mashiach and all that was supposed to happen, that's supposed to be spread out in the Tikkun over the course of how many years it could take? Because it could have been 1 year, could have been 10 years, could have been 25 years, could have been 100 years. It's up to us. Right? It's all up to us. The reason why the Galus has gone on for so long is because we've stretched it. The Jewish people have stretched it. Whatever we're supposed to accomplish, we haven't accomplished completely. The tikkun of the Jewish people has not become complete. If we were to have completed it by, let's say, doing more Torah mitzvahs at the same time we're going through the suffering, but that's what the Gra says. The reason why Mashiach ben Yosef probably won't have to die in battle, if he has to still fight the battle, is because of all the galus that we've gone through. The length of the galus and the suffering we've undergone will be enough to compensate for whatever death he would have to gone through at the end of history.
Because when you look at all that,
The point is that that's what that the final redemption, as much as we'd like to believe it's different than what once happened in the past, that really that history has been the hemshech of Galus Mitzrayim. And we've gone in the past to explain what that means. It's not so important. Well, it is important, but it's too much of a conversation right now. But Mitzrayim, the Kitzur, as Kabbalah points out, is made up of two words, Meitzur Yam. Right? Mitzrayim is the word Meitzur Yam. Doesn't have to be Egypt. Egypt happened to be, at that point of history, Mitzrayim. Mitzrayim can be anywhere in the world, just like the Brisker Rav points out, just like Amalek, based upon the Rambam, the Duke of the Rambam, which we saw, right? That Amalek is more than just a people physically descending from Amalek. That a person can be Amaleki by virtue of the way he behaves in this world towards the Jewish people. And likewise, the same thing is true of Mitzrayim. Mitzrayim is a concept. It's any nation, any people, any place in the world that by definition is Meitzur Yam. What's the Yam? The Yam is the Gematria 50. It's always an allusion to the Nun Shari Bina, the 50 gates of understanding that the Torah is based upon. It's the Hashkafa, the Hadracha. It's the way of following in the ways of HaKadosh Baruch Hu and focusing on Tikkun Olam and all the good things the Torah talks about. It's all the Nun Shari Bina. That's what all comes down to. The Gemara in Rosh Hashanah points out Hashem made the world with Nun Shari Bina. Kabbalah explains what that means, but that's what it is. Meitzur is a border. It's a boundary. So Meitzur Yam is any place in the world that confines that. If you're living in a place that by definition it interferes with your ability to connect up with the Nun Shari Bina vis-a-vis Torah and mitzvahs, doesn't mean you're not learning. You could be learning. But you're not learning in a way that it connects you to the ultimate goals of Klal Yisrael, and therefore the yearning for the completion of those goals, but it's more of a technical reality and kind of more of a profession you're doing, because the Torah is meant to change. It's more, it's to change people, to educate people. So Mitzrayim could be America. It could be Canada. It could be England. Any place in the world that distracts a Jew away from being what he's supposed to be. Al Pi Torah. Right? So likewise the same is Amalek as well. Amalek is any people that by definition is prepared to sacrifice their lives just to kill Jews. That's an Amaleki trait, as Rashi points out. That's not incidental, what Rashi is explaining. Rashi's telling the Iker. He's telling what the essence of Amalek is all about. So the reason why this is so important, the reason why all this makes a difference, is not simply, a sideshow over here, is because it's telling us that if the end of history is really just the completion of the beginning of history, so the issues of the beginning come back at the end. And that's important to know. You have to know what failed at the beginning. Why bring back these souls at the end of history if Stam history is just going right to the way it was going before? Because Baruch Hu has enough souls in the world to bring back, to reincarnate without going back and pulling from door Midbar. And the Erev Rav as well, right? And Moshe Rabbeinu. Why do that? Because Tikkun. And Tikkun means basically, as the Rambam points out, Tshuva Gemura requires basically three things. Number one is you have to do, you have charata, do vidui, right? You have to admit that that you made the mistake. So that's the first step. The second stage is vidui, right? You have to verbally admit the mistake that you made. It's part of the tshuva process. The third part is the hardest part of all. Yet, if you find yourself in the exact same position that you once were, that you don't do it again. The same temptation, you don't do it again. You have to be in the same situation. So just like, for example, this is the 10th hour, corresponding to the hour that Adam Arishon ate from the Eitz Das Tova Ra, because one day corresponds to 1,000 years. Divide up the 1,000 years according to the hours. It turns out that this corresponds to the period of time that Adam ate from the Eitz Das Tova Ra. So likewise, the point of that is also to mataken on a broader scale the Eitz Das Tova Ra, the mistake of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. So likewise also, whatever mistakes the Jewish people made back at the beginning of history is also going to come about at the end of history. We're working the same thing. So therefore, that means it's not by coincidence that Eretz Yisrael has risen to the surface once again. It's not like it was back then when it was the Canaanim living here, in Eretz Yisrael, and we had to conquer the 31 kings, and we wanted to stay in the Midbar. It's a different scenario in some respects, but in other respects, it's the exact same thing. Once again, the issue is Eretz Yisrael. And once again, it's people saying, we'd rather stay in the Midbar and learn Torah. So, there's a famous story, they talk about Rav Aaron Kotler, it's all after the war, when he's trying to determine whether he should go to America to help rebuild Jewry there, of the Eretz Yisrael, because the yeshiva was there, and people were, Panovich was already, started, and they were starting to grow. And he wanted to make a decision what to do, so he actually did the Gor Lagra, the famous Gor Lagra, where you open the Chumash up, if you just know what you're doing, and he turned to the passage that says, Aaron, go to the Midbar to meet Moshe, right? So the Moshe, we knew what he was talking about, but Moshe Feinstein, because he had told Rav Aaron Kotler to come and join him, and together they'll rebuild the Orthodox world in America, and it's legendary what they were able to accomplish. I mean, the two of them together changed everything. Plus all the help they got on the side, but they were the driving force, right? But where's the Midbar fit in? Because that's what America was called back then. It was called the Midbar. It was known as the Midbar. Where are you going? To the Midbar. Why? Because spiritually speaking, it was like a Midbar. It was destitute. They didn't have shuls. At that point in time, there was kashrus was almost nil in the beginning. There wasn't a support group. There was already a reform movement and the conservative movement, because a lot of the Russian Jews had come over in the early 1900s, the end of the 1800s and the early 1900s. And they already began setting up reform and conservative organizations. But the Orthodox world was the last to get started. So it's mamish called the Midbar at that point in time. So it's the same issue all over again. It can't be taken light. That's not coincidental. It can't be pushed aside. Before a person decides they don't want to be here, they don't want to live here, they have no cheshek to be here, and when you ask them, when do you plan to come, they say, when Mashiach comes. Because inside they're really saying, I hope he's not coming too fast, too soon, because if he does, this will be really, throw a monkey wrench in my program over here and cause inconvenience, the whole thing. Before you take that negativity, and however you wrap it up, it's not a Torah government, however you wrap it up, right? You have to ask yourself, am I failing the test a second time? Is my neshama one of those neshamas that rejected Eretz Yisrael way back then, and I'm back here now today to rectify that, because the Rizal says that's what's going on at the end of history, right? And we're so close to the end, it's like to assume that we're not the final generation, it's getting harder to do, right? You have to question, right? Because b'chol ofen, the pasuk says, "Atat takum terchem Tzion ki eis lechenek kiva moed." Because Baruch Hu will get up and you will show mercy to the Jewish people, because the appointed time, will have come. The Gula, right? But what does it depend upon? Because even if a person, and this is crucially important, this is like the central part of the message, even if a person has a halachic priority, a halachic reason not to live in Eretz Yisrael today, but it's so easy to do so, and the land's back on our heads, the miracles are 100% clear what's going on, right? And the Torah world has been developed to such an extent that you can survive quite nicely over here. Even if there's a halachic reason why the person can't be here, there's never a heter to not fulfill the second pasuk. Ki ratzu avdechas of neha vesafrayechanein. That your servants they cherish your stones, or they want your stones and cherish your dust. Ki ratzu avdecha es of neha. They want your stones. This is where they want to be. The yearning has to be for Eretz Yisrael, no matter where you are in the world, at all times. There's never a het. There's no halachic reason not to feel that love, unless a person's so sick with love for Eretz Yisrael, his mamish depressing him. So maybe then he should put it out of his mind because he can't survive without coming here. That's not usually the case. That's more the exception than the rule. So that's the first point. One of the reasons why the people, feel that it's not really the time. I mean, less so all the time. I mean, it just becomes more obvious all the time that this is really a chelik of the gula, without going to all the back information, which we'll go to later on, because there's so much hashgacha pratis. I mean, people have to really realize this is not a new thing. It didn't just begin in 1948. It's a process the Gra began back in the late 1700s, that his students continued on with in the 1800s. And it was developing, and there was waves of aliyah. The Jewish people were moving after so long, after over 1,000 years of moving away from Eretz Israel. We just couldn't get back here. All the forces were pushing us further into the diaspora. And on top of that, Eretz Israel was being conquered by one nation after another. It was too dangerous to get it. There was the Crusades in the beginning. Eventually, after that, there was all the wars going on. It just wasn't relevant. It wasn't shack just to even plant the land. It wasn't successful. They tried. The Gentile nations tried to harvest this land. They were not successful, just like the Torah promised. The miracles that we see today, which we take for granted, they tried to bring about the same miracles back in their time. It didn't happen. Because Baruch Hu said, for 2,000 years, the land is going to remain fallow until you come back. We came back. One of the reasons why it's so distracting for people, so difficult for people to accept, is because of the fact it didn't happen in the ideal means. We're idealists. The Jewish people, the Torah world, are idealists. How should it have happened? It should have happened the way the Gra wanted it to happen. How did he want it to happen? You got the Gra, basically the Gadol Ador in his generation, or amongst one of the main Gadol Ador at that time, certainly for the Ashkenazic world, going with his holy Talmidim, on a pilgrimage to Eretz Israel, making Aliyah, settling the land, building a Torah community. It grows and grows and grows, and eventually, basically, the place becomes a Torah state. Wonderful. That would be great to have it that way. Unfortunately, the Gra, who did try to come here, was sent back home again. Most people don't know why he had to end his journey. There's a lot of guesswork involved, but in Kol Torah they actually explain specifically why he had to go back home, because basically he was going from one level to another level, and had he continued to go to the level he was supposed to go to, he would have been in a position of Geula. The Jewish people were ready for that, so therefore they were forced to go back. He was forced to go back and end his participation, directly being involved. But his Talmidim continued and went and set up a yishuv, and eventually, the waves of Aliyah came. Eventually, the draining of the swamps, until the countries has become, after hundreds of years, what it is today. It's an long, ongoing process. Nevertheless, something happened in 1948. Really, before that, we're talking about the World Zionist Conference at the end of the 19th century. For the most part, run by secular Jews, people who not only didn't keep Torah mitzvahs per se, but they were committed to developing this nation, this country, under a secular banner. So therefore, there's a rejection saying, well, that's the way it's going to happen, that's the way it's going to go, and that's the way it did happen in the end. So therefore, how can that possibly be min hashamayim? How can that possibly be a chelik of the Gula? I mean, the truth is, the question should never get off the ground. Because anybody who learns Tanakh and opens the Chumash, goes back to the beginning of time, they'll always they'll see things going on. I mean, first you go back, and the best one of all has to be Lot with his daughters. Talk about a lack of holiness, a lack of kedusha, from which comes Rus, right? Talk about it was a clever Rus, which Baruch Hu did over there. Rus comes to this whole thing, fools the Sitra Achra, and becomes the grandmother of eventually of the ancestors of Mashiach ben David. I mean, it's a bizarre circumstance. How the whole thing happens. It's so tumadik that even Avram Avinu is forced to move away from Lot and stay away from him because it's a bad seat, it's a bad situation. Then you have Yehuda, right? Yehuda is going on. He's lost his wife conveniently, right? He goes off to, and don't forget the fact that Boaz, by the way, by Rus, Boaz died the next day. You can just see the headlines, right? Boaz wrong, right? Made a mistake. They argued with him, and he went this way, they went that way. And because Baruch obviously took his wrath out. Takes a while. David HaMelech, his whole life was torture until the day he died. In fact, the Gemara says he wasn't even absolved in the eyes of his enemies until after he died. He davened to Kodesh Baruch Hu, please make it clear to my enemies while I'm still living that you're on my side. Hashem said no. Now that's going to come later on in Shlomo HaMelech's time, and this is the ancestor of Mashiach, and he had very rough life. And then you have Yehuda who's going out to shear his flock, and comes across Tamar, right? And all because of the fact that he did not give her his third son. That's why he's called Shalah, because Shalah means hers. He belongs to her in the end. She didn't get what she's supposed to get, so therefore the whole thing happens to him. He becomes a serf, and only because he's moide, the whole thing. If it wasn't for the whole da'ah, it wasn't moide to what he did wrong, which makes him the melech in the end, she would have died together with parents and Zerach, and there would be no parents in the end. But of course it was meant to be, so the Kodesh Baruch Hu brings it up. But what a convoluted way to go about, making Jewish history and building Mashiach, when they go ahead and they talk about redemption, and they make their messiahs and the whole thing. They go to the other extreme. They take men out of the picture altogether. They make it so white, so to speak, that it's like literally, it's beyond human possibility. And we go ahead, and our history is exactly the opposite. The building of Mashiach is one of the murkiest projects the Jewish people have ever undergone. And there's a reason for that. And there's even a name for that. The Rizal says the following thing. This concept is extremely important, because the Rizal says, for a great soul to leave the klipos, you should know it must be done b'mirma u'techbolis. Mirma means like trickery, techbolis means like scheming. And so that statement alone requires some explanation. What does it mean for the klipos, for a soul to leave? Before the chet of the Eitzadas Tova Ra, all the neshamas were incorporated in Adam Rishon's neshama. That people know. They're all a piece of his neshama. As a result of the chet, the Gemara says in Chagiga, because Baruch Hu put his hand on top of Adam, right, and he shrunk him from 500, shanim to 100. It's called shanim. It's a measurement, right? But it's like it made him small. So the Rizal explains that meant that all the neshamas that Adam previously carried as part of his neshama were taken away from him. All that was left behind was his neshama that he required for himself. What happened to all the other neshamas that were originally on the side of Kedusha? They fell into a world called the klipos. What are the klipos? The word klipa itself means appeal, because the klipos, or the chitzonim, which means externalities, basically it's that reality of spiritual impurity that HaKadosh Baruch Hu created to act as an obstacle along the path to Hashem, just like the word Satan means an obstacle, right? Because that's the way you use your free will. If getting to Hashem was simply a walk in the garden, just like straight there from here, point A to point B, with nothing to challenge you, there'd be no free will involved, and therefore no schar. You have to use your free will to choose to do the right thing to get to Hashem. In order to be able to choose, you have to be challenged. There has to be evil in the world. So the klipos represent that reality of evil, of impurity, the whole Kabbalistic discussion, exactly what it is, technically what does it mean, how does it function, how does it work. But for all intents and purposes, to simplify it, it is that which exists in creation to obstruct your path to Hashem, so you will use your free will to overcome it and earn the right to be close to Hashem. That's what the klipos do. So as a result of the chet, of the Eitzadas Tova Ra, all the neshamas except for Adam HaRishon's and Chava's, was hers basically, fell into the realm of the klipos. And history is the neshamas being drawn out of the klipos, taken out, right? They exist as sparks. It's like a swamp, spiritual, not a physical swamp, but a spiritual, swamp of impurity. That's where they all are. The holier the soul, the deeper it's inside. But the klipos is not just like dirty water. The klipos there's like a personification. There's a metzias. They're fighting for their life as well. They have to live off kedusha, just like we live off kedusha. So therefore, they're holding onto this nitzotz, this spark, which is a soul, because it's a source of nourishment as well. It is not like to give up sparks. The holder the spark, the less it wants to give it up. I mean, this is obviously touching on a very deep discussion, but that's what happens. But that's where the souls were. They fell into the klipos itself, and he says, in order for it to get out, right, Kosh Baruch Hu has to use a process called mirmo tachbolos, because without that, they won't let go. What does that mean, Lamaisa? What is that? How does it? Shep Lamaisa. You have a story in the Chumash, a very bizarre story. Avram Avinu, right? He's got a nephew. His nephew is Lot. They go down to Mitzrayim together. They come up together. Now they're very wealthy. They made a lot of money in Mitzrayim. Paro made them wealthy. Lot's, his farmers are saying, this land one day is going to belong to us. Avram's farmers are saying, but today it doesn't. So therefore we can't take it. It doesn't, we can't use it like we're bowling it, like we're owners yet. So a fight ensues. So as a result of that, Avram says, it's not working out over here. You go to the right, I'll go to the left. You go to the left, I'll go to the right. Whatever the case may be, but we're allowed to split up. So Avram, Lot says, is looking at Stom. Stom is a nice, very attractive place. Brochures show, all kinds of whirlpool bathrooms, that spas. Right? It's a place he wants to go. And Avram says nothing. Says nothing. Mr. Kiruv says nothing. The man who spends all of his time getting people out of that place, convincing them this is not the place to go, to try to put God in their mouth, that they be close to Hashem. His own nephew is going to Stom, and he says nothing in the end. So maybe because he couldn't, maybe he wouldn't listen, maybe he did, and the Torah doesn't report it, but he's masking to the whole thing in the end. So a lot goes down there. A very strange story, takes place. What happens? He goes down, he becomes a shofet, he marries somebody from Stom, he has daughters, he got actually 4 daughters, 2 that are married, 2 that are not married. All of a sudden, one day, he decides to destroy this place called Stom. The place is really gone way down the road to a bad path. It doesn't justify its existence anymore. So Baruch Hu says, I need to destroy this place called Stom. And he sends a malach to take Lot out. Lot, he doesn't believe him at first. Eventually, he convinces him. And he says to his sons-in-laws, this place is going to go up in smoke, probably tomorrow, whatever. Let's go. And it was a joke in their eyes. They stay behind them with their wives, and he escapes with his wife and his 2 daughters. But they're told not to look back. Conveniently, his wife looks back, becomes a pillar of salt, which Josephus writes in his day. You could still see it, with the pillar of salt that was Lot's wife, even that time of the Romans. Right? And he's stuck with his 2 daughters, his 2 single daughters, and they get this weird impression for whatever reason that the whole world has been destroyed. There's nobody left but their father and them. They won't have children. Lot's not going to be masking to this, so they get him drunk. The second night, as Rashi points out, he knows what's going on. He goes along with the whole thing, and he has 2 children, which is very unusual, first of all, because who gets pregnant the first time? Moab and Ammon in the end. From Moab eventually comes Ruth, and eventually comes the answer of Mashiach ben David. Very bizarre story. Very, very strange story. And how do you answer for it? You just accept it. If it's fact, you can't argue the reality that it happened. It occurred. It's Jewish history. You may like it. You may complain about it and scratch your head over it, but you can't take it out of the Chumash. The Chumash says this is what took place. So the Al-Sheikh, he says, let me tell you what's really going on over here. He says, the klipos is a reality. It's not like, you dig down into the ground like they're low, and somewhere towards the core of the earth you'll find the klipos. The klipos is all around us. The world of Tumah overlaps the world of Kedusha. They overlap. As a result of that, you can have Tumah places in the world around you. Just over there, you can find a place of Tumah. You go someplace, you'll find, places of ill repute because it's Tumah. Right? Just in your own house, you can have a bath, which is a place of Tumah. The klipos can exist, they overlap with the reality of Kedusha. So therefore, Avram understands that history is all about redemption, right? It's all about Gula. It's all about, completing the purpose of creation. We don't always live like that, but the Gedolim do. And the Avos did. They knew that's what they were there for. That the clock was ticking ever since Adam was kicked out of the Garden of Eden. It's all about getting back. So therefore, he knows that it's all about being Mashiach ben Yosef and Mashiach ben David and bringing history to completion. You don't have to wait thousands of years for Mashiach to come. You can be Mashiach in your generation. He's the Gadol Hador. He's the Gadol Hador. So therefore, he can facilitate the Gula process. So therefore, he knows there's an Etzotz that's meant to be Mashiach. And he knows also, because he's a Kabbalist, because the original Kabbalist, not the kind we have today, but someone who spoke to Kosh Baruch Hu was able to, was a different generation, as the Ramchal points out. They knew things back then. They had a Masorah from Adam Arisha, from Gan Eden, right? So he knows that there's a thing called the klipos, and the holier the spark, the holier the soul, the deeper it's going to be in the klipos, because they're going to hang on to it. It's valuable, right? It's like a king, right? Who's got this, very valuable, jewel. He puts it inside of a safe, inside of a safe, inside of a safe, with guards around it, because he's not going to play games with this jewel in the end. So what happens? So Avram says, okay, where are those klipos? There's an etzotz of David and Melech somewhere in the world, where the Alshach says, this is explaining, and it's going to be in the place where the klipos are the strongest. Where are the klipos the strongest? He's looking around, right, and he sees there's this one place, it's the worst of all places, and that's stone. So he figures somewhere in there's got to be an etzotz of David and Melech, and I have to get it out. But how am I going to do that? I'll go down there, I'll buy a drink, I'll get the netzotz with the drink, I can't marry someone from stone. I'm not going to do that, right? They won't even allow me to come down there. They'll probably hang me, they'll string me up because I'm Mr. Chesed and they're Gvura, right? What's mine was yours, what's mine is mine, what's yours is yours, right? Total strict Gvura. It's anti-Avraham. Well, how will I get the spark out? How am I going to be poida this netzotz of David and Melech? How does it work? How am I going to do it? Scratching his head day after day. All of a sudden, one day, Lot, they start to fight, and Lot says, I'll go to stone. And Avram says, this might just work. You know why? Because he's enough like me. I was mashpi on him enough. He's mushpa enough from me to be able to have the chesed to withstand perhaps stone, and you see that, because he does bring in the malachim and take care of them, do chesed, and they complain about his chesed in the end, and that's why his wife, she turns a pillar of salt because he wanted to give salt to the guests, and she says that strange custom you'll also introduce into our way of living as well. So therefore, Mina Keneged Mina, Rashi says she became a pillar of salt later on. So he's got the chesed to survive it, but he's also enough like them, he can go down there and be accepted. I can't do it, but maybe he can. So Avram stands back and he watches the whole thing transpire.
So that's the subterfuge.
That's the subterfuge. That's the whole thing. Yeah. And exactly what happens.
Because Avram they would have thrown right now.
Now, the klipos not stupid. I mean, they're not so smart, but they're not so stupid either. They know they're on guard the entire time. The king has the guards around the vault. The vault is electrified. It's got all kinds of laser beams crossing this way, that way, because he knows that people are going to try and steal us. The klipos are on guard against this netzotz being stolen the entire time. So therefore, if a Tamach Chacham comes down to take them, they know the alarms go off, right? If a good guy comes down, a tahoric person comes to get them, they know, right? And if it happens through a kosher means, they sense it. So therefore, what does the Kosh Baruch Hu do instead? Mirma utachbolus, says the Arizal. Lot, his daughters, right? Incest. It may turn out it's not even incest in the end. For all we know, because Baruch will show us at the end of history that really these two daughters were switched in the hospital, or somebody else's daughters. They really, who knows what the hell? But on the surface of it, it certainly looks like it, doesn't it? That's what it's called. Two daughters. Okay, he married a Gentile. It's never done a kedusha. There's ways to read Haterim into the situation, but no matter how you look at it, doesn't. This is the founding, the founding fathers, of Mashiach. It's doesn't go over too well historically. So the Sitra Achar, who's got his goggles on, is like, where is Gula? Where is Gula? Try to stop. He looks down and he sees Lot and his daughters getting drunk, the whole thing. He says, nothing to worry about over here. This is like, because Baruch Hu would never, ever, ever bring Mashiach that way. I mean, through Lot, who's he? He's the nephew of Avram Avinu, who basically is, what does he have? What kind of kirchas does he have? And there's daughters who are the daughters of a stomite woman, it's like, what could possibly evolve from that? Rus. Tzedekis. Right? We just had last week in Shavuos, we read about Rus. Who would ever have thought that could come from that? And how did that come? Elimelech goes, to Moab, and he's not supposed to, raises his family there, and everything. It's like the whole story is so convoluted. And the result says that's called Mirma Utachpolis.
Even the way she went to Boaz.
Yeah, the whole thing. Mirma Utachpolis. The question is why? Why? Why do we have to go through such a backwards, confusing, elaborate scheme to bring about what history is all about in the first place? Why can't we go straight? Because Baruch Hu says, the Gemara in Sanhedrin says very specifically, brings the pasuk from Yeshaya, Achishena Bita. And the Gemara darshans out, Zoicha, Achishena, Lo Zoicha, Bi'ita. The Gemara goes a few lines down and says, and don't think it's the same thing, by the way. Lo Zoicha, right, Mashiach comes running on the back of a donkey. Zoicha, he comes riding on clouds. It changes the quality of the Geula. The Geula in the end will be the same. The Yemos Mashiach will be the same, but the path, the process to get there. Hashem says, if you do what you have to do to bring about redemption, and you complete the process, alpi halacha, alpi hashkafa, then everything is straightforward. Boom, 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 boom. But if you're going to be distracted, and you're not going to be focused, and you're not going to do your part to bring the redemption, the Sitra Achra, he's got tinus. He can complain, just like by the Yam Suf. The Sitra Achra says, you're going to save the Jewish people and drown the Mitzrim? Halali of the Vodazara, halali of the Vodazara. So Kosh Baruch Hu send them off into Iyov, the whole thing, they're twisting and turning history, not because of Kosh Baruch Hu plays games, but because like a father who covers for his son, who doesn't do what he's supposed to do. Kosh Baruch Hu, the Geula has to come. The stages have to occur. There are katzim, there are timelines, there are dates by which things have to happen. If we don't do it the proper way, it has to happen in a backwards and convoluted way, in a way that looks exactly like just the opposite, when in fact it's completely for the sake of Geula. The only problem is, and he just goes on to say, just finish the whole thing, we'll come back to Bezrat Hashem next week.
Sapma Rebbe was confused that he fell into the trap.
I'm going to avoid the question. Right? Thus you will find that many great souls have come in the bodies of simpletons and sometimes in the children of evil people, just as Avram being born from Terach. In fact, the rabbis have said, and is in the Zohar as well, that Terach angered God by having relations with his wife while she was in Nida. And yet from this Avram Avinu was born. However, by placing the soul of Avram Avinu into his seed, right, into this seed, God tricked the Chitzodim, the Sitra Achra, right, who would have said, what can possibly come from this? Not only is it coming from Terach and a woman who's like nobody, but it's even a type of impurity. The Torah forbids this later on. How could there be a savior for the Jewish people from this? And there was, called Avraham Avinu in the end, right? So the Chitzonim had no idea it was his tikkun. For this reason, Avraham had to be thrown to the fiery furnace because it doesn't come for nothing. Avraham was put under Ur Kasdim because that was part of the cleansing process for the way he came into the world. That's not a Pshat. That's not Remes.
Where were you reading this from?
That's from the Rizal. Shar Gilgulim. That's not Drush. That's Sod. That's Sod. That's Sod explaining history in a way that the other three levels cannot and do not. And yet, without knowing it, you can't understand history. Without knowing it, you can make mistakes about the most important events. It's right there in the Chumash, on the Pshat level, it's there. You've got Yehuda, you've got Lot, you've got Avraham, you've got all these things taking place right there in the Chumash. Bizarre intimacies, right? Right? But here, right here. Right?
I'm sorry.
It's okay. So, B'ezras Hashem, we'll come back. Well, I just finished the quote. Right? He says, Mirmu Tachbos is also the reason for the episodes of Tamar, which we spoke about, Rus, Rachav the Zona, right? Rachav is a story to herself, right? Rachav, the Gemara, what she says about Rachav, she was a prostitute. She was one of the most highly paid prostitutes of her time. She married Yoshua ben Nun, the gadol of the door. For 40 years, while the Klal Yisrael was wandering the desert, that was her profession. The moment they come to the land, she's the one who actually brings them in. She's the one who protects, Kalev and Pinchas. Right, and prepares the way for the Geula to overcome Yericho. And then she converts, becomes a Jew, and marries the gadol ador. It's Pella. How do you answer these things? And then sweep under the carpet. There's God, whatever, And all the souls of converts, and all the kings from David and Mashiach will have come from Ruth the Moabite, and the union of Yehud and Tamar. Rabbi Akiva himself was a son of converts, who descended from Sisera. This is the trickery and scheming the Holy One, blessed is He, uses against the Klippas in order to free a soul exploited amongst them. Because when history does not work the way it's supposed to, Hakadosh Baruch Hu has to do things through the back door. And that will play a very important role in understanding recent history.